Yes, welcome back to a special edition of the Secret Sun Radio Mystery Hour. I am here with Raj Sisodia, and we are going to unpack the season premiere of The X-Files, Episode 1, My Struggle 3. This episode has been quite controversial, has caused quite a stir, quite a bit of Twitter drama with people who apparently aren't terribly familiar with the series history, since people seem to be shocked at the revelation that we received at the end, which we'll get to. So, massive spoiler alerts, massive spoiler alerts. This is going to be nothing but spoilers. So, if you haven't seen the episode yet, listen to this later, or not. It's up to you. But let's get into this. I'm going to just give you a bit of groundwork here. So this is the 11th season of the X-Files. We're going to be seeing 10 episodes here. This has been in the works for 2 years now, since the a rather limited season in 2016, which personally I don't actually consider canon. And I think that's probably an opinion that a lot of X-Files fans share. But we seem to be getting back on some sort of track here. We're going to be seeing 10 episodes. And I guess it's going to be bookended by mythology episodes. But this whole concept of Scully's son William seems to be the through line here. We saw a lot of hints in the previous season that this was going to be part of the series' new mythology. And of course, a lot of fans were very disappointed when William didn't actually show up in the series itself. But we did actually see him. Oh, spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! We actually did see William a number of times in Scully's visions. And of course, at the very end of the episode, we see him in some sort of distress, some sort of dilemma, and of course we'll get back into that revelation that is causing so much controversy. So Raj, let me just get
Yes.
your general impression. What did you think of My Struggle 3?
Yeah. Well, I think I was in two minds about it, Chris. First of all, the kind of issues I guess that I had with it were the same issues that I had with season 10, and that's season 10. Like I'm such a fan of the X Files. I know every aspect, every area of that show because I've watched each episode so many times. So I'm a super fan. So the bar has to be set pretty high for me to be kind of like super invested in X Files Light or New Coke X or whatever it is. And so yeah, like it had some of the same issues that I had. For example, the purple prose of Mulder's monologuing, and also the fact that the entire episode was built around very static conversational scenes that were basically expository. But I get why they did that, and I understand the kind of the awkwardness of because of where they left the finale in season 10. I kind of expected a lot of exposition and some tweaking and and kind of like taking a few steps back. Yeah, but overall, surprisingly, I found myself sort of quite invested in the episode, despite all its flaws. It had a sense of urgency that kind of carried me through the episode, and I guess the characters, Mulder especially, because he had the most to do, that he felt more like Mulder. And this episode, despite all its flaws, felt more like the X-Files than all of season 10, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not saying it's like a masterwork by any stretch of the imagination, but it felt like it had the flavor of X-Files, despite the ways that it was compromised or lacking or flawed, etc. So yeah, I was surprisingly engaged by it, and considering the fact that I tried really, really hard to be engaged in season 10, and it was just really difficult for me. But in this episode, yeah, I think Chris Carter is trying to. I think he tried to, as best as he could in the premiere, kind of right a few wrongs and kind of course correct a few things, and kind of. I think he must have taken a step back and said, okay, like, you know, what are the real flavors of the show, and how can I sort of draw them forward and connect them with like the current socio-political climate, you know? In a nutshell, I guess those are my views, Chris.
Yeah, well, we saw that montage at the beginning with CGB, Carl Gerhard Bush, we discover is his actual name, where there was a lot of news footage. We saw things from Charlottesville. We saw things from with Trump and Trump's sort of cohorts and his minions. But we also saw a lot of archival footage, dating back to World War II.
Yeah.
And whatnot in the post-war era. So yeah, it seems to be very much an attempt to fast forward sort of the X-Files' Cold War fixations up to the present day. Yeah, let me tell you, I'm going to tell you just a couple thoughts here, and these might be a little bit impressionistic, but I think it's worth exploring. First of all, we really get a sense of Carter's directorial style, because the flavor of this, the tone, the shots, the texture is very much of a piece with I Want to Believe, going all the way back to I Want to Believe, that we saw both in the My Struggles in season 10. So,
yes.
He definitely has a very distinct and consistent style directorially with this kind of material. Of course, we had Babylon, which was just sort of off the rails in so many regards, and
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
very hard to put that in a category with these episodes as far as tone and structure and flavor.
Yeah.
The other thing that really strikes me about these episodes, and this is something that I've really gotten a very strong sense of since the first feature film, Fight the Future, is that I really don't think he likes having to do all this expository stuff.
No.
I think that is much more a result of network saying, you've got to bring everyone up to speed. You've got to explain this stuff, because the whole thing about the X-Files in the first 5 seasons is that they were just constantly piling mystery upon mystery upon mystery on you. Just questions and enigmas, and it was just a lot of fans complained about that they got lost, they couldn't understand. I mean, everybody says the mythology, is inexplicable. It doesn't make sense. So in order to counter that, I get the sense that Fox has been riding him particularly to wrap everything up, to explain everything, and to do these really kind of torturous expository episodes that I'm not exactly sure he really feels comfortable with. I don't know if that's exactly his style. I mean, if you look at the standalones that he's done since, I guess the second season, well, for that matter, the first season. I mean, you don't see that kind of structure with this endless, talky, expository dialogue. And I'll be perfectly frank, it's that kind of writing is not playing to his strengths. His strengths as a writer, very much these sort of terse, sharp exchanges. This wordy, prosy, almost investigative journalism kind of stuff just doesn't play to his strengths at all. I don't think he really has an ear for that kind of dialogue. I mean, you really need to have the language be as clean and as uncluttered as possible to really sell that stuff. It has to be conversational, and he doesn't opt for conversational. He opts for rhetoric, and I don't think that works. I don't think that plays to his strengths. I mean, I do think that he, when he sets his mind to it, can write very crisp and punchy dialogue. When characters are interacting with each other.
Yeah.
The voiceover stuff just it makes me
You,
cringe. It really
you,
does.
you know what I think? I agree with you. I don't think I've ever thought of it in quite that way, Chris. But like, yeah, as you're saying it, it kind of makes sense. That like, I think the way that I kind of see it is that like all the purple pro stuff and the kind of heavy-handed expositional stuff. I think that's sort of something in it's something at cross purposes in the sense that the whole conceit of the X-Files and the whole sort of I guess what I would perceive as Carter's essential vision for the show is kind of like it's a shamanistic sort of conceit. It's, as you've pointed out before on the blog, Chris, it's POV. It's it's the whole subject object dichotomy. What is real? What is perception? What is illusion? How do we negotiate what is fact, etc., etc., etc.? How do we define truth in a world that just seems increasingly fluid? And back in the 90s, those questions were they were so sharp and acute. I guess because those questions were sort of fresh. We were in the 90s, we were in kind of like postmodernism and etc., etc. And now we're in this sort of current political climate where there is no truth. It's all just madness and chaos. So yeah, I think that some of the purple prose that I kind of see in the earlier X-Files is sort of, I sort of interpret it as Carter trying to fulfill that sort of shamanistic vision for the show that he has, whereas at the same time still trying to capture that pseudo documentarian feel. So I think Carter's trying to play around with contrasts a lot in the show and opposites, and I think sometimes he gets it pitch perfect and other times not so much. But it's like, as an artist myself, or as a as a wannabe artist, I commend that spirit. I commend that sort of kind of fearless spirit of storytelling that he has, even if he doesn't always hit the notes quite right.
Yeah, I think that's all well said. But my point here is I feel that this mode that rankles a lot of fans is kind of counter to the original spirit and mission statement of the X-Files, which was to show, not tell,
Totally,
to leave things amorphous, to leave things open to interpretation. So when we have these characters in these My Struggle episodes, and I believe that from what I've heard, that the fourth episode in this series, which will be the series or the season finale, is going to be William's struggle, which is kind of interesting in a way. It will be interesting to see how that's handled. I'm dreading to see Carter trying to write the monologue of a 16-year-old boy in 2018, but that's neither here nor there. So it's I mean, what I felt, especially, I felt that the Mulder voiceovers were just entirely extraneous.
I just felt so too.
They didn't need to be there, and it always made me wish that you could sort of have a remix capability with these things, where you could sort of just have that nice Mark Snow music. And the thing that I really appreciate is that Mark Snow seemed to be calling back to the flavor of those great season 2 soundtracks. Very sort of percussive and industrial, and very ominous and moody.
Yeah.
So we got sort of a flavor of that, but I just felt like why is Mulder just explaining what he just showed us? What we just saw. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't add any new information that either a hardcore old fan like us needs, or even a new fan. It's like, as you said, it's all right there on the screen. It's like, okay, we get that the most important person in the world to this dude is in danger, as she has been many times, and he's damn well going to do something about it. We get that, so we don't need this sort of weird. It just seems extraneous is the perfect word. It was utterly extraneous, I felt, and yeah.
It didn't add anything to the story.
Oh,
So there were those are sort of my criticisms. What I did like about this, and I felt, even though that it's very much of the same piece as the predecessors to this, this mini series within the series that we're seeing here, I felt that there was much more an effort to start to move this thing in a direction that didn't lead into a corner, into the straitjacket of destroying the world. It's ironic to me because I had written sort of these posts with the previous season where I looked at well, what is going on here, because everybody was like freaked out about the cliffhanger, and I'm sort of drawing on precedent with previous things that we've seen, say in Redux or say in Zero Sum, just all the elements that seem to be referenced in that season finale previously. To me, it's very amusing and a bit ironic that it was all a dream. It was all a dream.
I know, right?
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah,
actually a dream, but it was a vision that William had been telepathically communing to Scully. Now,
Scully steps out of the shower, a la Dallas or
yeah,
whatever,
the death of Jr. Exactly. No, Carter insists that was the plan all along, and that's why we see that extreme close up on her eye, sort of bridging those sequences in My Struggle 2. That she's in the office, she gets the call from Tad O'Malley, we see this extreme close up on her eye, and then the UFO triangle, hovers over the bridge, and we see that extreme close up again.
Do you buy that, Chris? Like, because I'm not sure. I don't know the ins and outs as well as you do. So, I mean, do you buy that was the gag all along?
I think if that's meant to be the tip off, I think it's entirely possible. I think it's. I think he was playing sort of both ends here. I think he decided that, okay, this could be it. This could be the last episode. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go completely bug out crazy in a way that only somebody as fractal as Chris Carter could do, and just blow the whole thing up. But give myself this little trap door just in case the show is renewed and I have to sort of backtrack, or backpedal on this. So I think that that's entirely possible. I don't think it's unreasonable. No, I don't think it's
kind of like season 2 Millennium, except they didn't really write themselves a kind of trapdoor to get out of it for season 3 of Millennium.
Well, because they were writing that story under the assumption that the series was going to be canceled, and it was kind of renewed. Counter to anyone's expectations. Nobody expected the show to be renewed for the 3rd season, and then they took a lot of heat for that. But what are they going to have the show be? I mean, is it going to be like a post-apocalyptic drama? I mean, that's not that was never going to work. So they had, what else are you going to do? You have to recover from that. You have to get the show back on some sort of equilibrium.
Well,
go ahead.
When I heard that the show was picked up for another season, I just assumed that they were going to do some version of what they turned out doing. So it was never like a surprise to me, because as someone who loves writing and someone who reads all the time, it's like that's what I would have done. Hopefully, I would have handled it sort of slightly better. Hopefully, that's what my ego tells me anyway. But I think stepping back and vision and retconning the ending a little bit, so that we can have, like you said, a feeling that we're moving through some sort of arc, like the promise that season 10 is going to have some sort of season 11 is going to have some sort of connective tissue between the episodes, which will hopefully make it feel more cohesive as a whole, which I think we didn't really get that feeling in the miniseries because it's limited episode run and they're all trying to find their feet and find their way back into the characters. And so that kind of slight awkwardness or that awkwardness that you kind of feel in season 10 I think Carter is trying to like have less of that in season 11. So yeah,
Well,
it wasn't.
that remains to be seen, though. I mean, the problem,
It does.
yeah, I mean, the thing that made season 10 so jarring to me was it's like they didn't have any tone meetings, you know.
Yeah.
In the old series, every episode would have a tone meeting where Chris and Frank would meet with the writer and the director, and just make sure that everything was flowing and everything was conducive and everything was consistent to the overall season. That you weren't getting these harsh and jarring transitions. And I think that's what bothered me so much. I mean, there's so many things that bothered me about season 10, but one of the things that really, really bothered me is that what it felt like is that everybody just went off in their own little corner and wrote their stories and did their direction and had no interest to see what everyone else was doing. Basically what we saw, I mean, is the My Struggle episodes, have a sort of internal consistency. But everything else, I mean, it's so you're jumping from completely idiosyncratic and separate vision. Even within, I mean, Carter's own little transition there with Babylon, which just was completely unlike anything he's ever done in his life. So it just felt like you were just watching almost like one of these kind of things where these albums that they put out where they'll get a bunch of disparate artists to cover, like, I don't know, Bing Crosby or David Bowie or Elvis. I mean, whoever. I mean, it doesn't really matter. But it's like everybody sort of does their own little idiots. Everybody's got to put their mark on it. Everybody's got to sort of show, oh, this is how and they go to extremes, and it's always very pretentious and contrived. And that's really what I felt about season 10, is that it's just like, oh, here's my version of the X-Files,
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And like, maybe I'm kind of giving Carter, a bit too much goodwill. We'll see how season 11 turns out. I hope that's what he's trying to do. I hope he's trying to create a more consistent tone, or because those, as you said, the tone is so important in storytelling, because in order to like hold someone's imagination, you have to be able to create a certain ambience. You have to be able to create a certain mood and sustain it and change it when it's necessary to be changed, etc. And that was one of the richest aspects of the X-Files, is that you could immerse yourself in this like incredibly atmospheric world that just had so many edges and corners and secrets, and yeah, so can he, can this new kind of more network, slicker, modern version of the X-Files recapture that? I kind of doubt it, but like, I'm curious to see how far he can get with, having some sort of tone carry through, because even in the old seasons, like the Monster of the Week episodes would still have mythology components, so you felt like you were watching some people's lives where things intertwine and things cross over as they do in our boring everyday lives. So that sort of, that grandeur, I guess is what I'm saying, is kind of was lacking from season 10. And maybe it's just the times we live in, Chris. I don't really see that kind of level of grandeur and that sort of the depths that X-Files plumbed ever really being done so again by any kind of modern TV show in quite the same way, because X-Files is such a singular, unique thing,
Oh, no, absolutely. Let me just backtrack this a bit first. And one of the interesting things about this episode, and I think very much ties back to episodes, in this particular instance, ties back to, for instance, Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man, where we see CGB, Carl, let's call him Carl. I think it's funny to call him Carl. We see Carl retelling the story of history through his lens, that, he was basically the prime mover with all these various traumas and triumphs and whatnot, and which I think is kind of funny because in the context of the X Files, it could be entirely delusional on his part. You know, he could have just been like almost like a Zelig-like figure in all this, and had no real impact on these things that he gives himself credit for, and that's, I think, a conceit in the X Files that a lot of fans are sort of oblivious to, that everybody could be lying. And I think it's interesting in the title card here that, you know, I want to believe sort of morphs into I want to lie. So what Carter seems to be saying here is that everything that CGB Carl, let's call him Carl again, Carl could be saying here is just bullshit. So you know, it's funny because we have the whole situation with the moon landings, for instance, that sort of closes out the teaser that he was the man in charge at Area 51 with the fake moon landings and things like that. So, you know, it's pretty obvious to me that Carter is tuned in. I mean, he's still sort of keeping up with what's going on, and as far as the secret space program and everything. But, you know, one thing that I want to sort of bring this up to is that in season 10, there was a lot of sort of consternation about Monica's motivations, which is kind of ironic to me because, you know, back in the day, everyone just flat out hated Monica, and just she was constantly being abused on the internet. And no, I really feel that a lot of the same people who were hating on her, you know, 15 years ago, are now, like, you know, born again Monica fans. But now we sort of have Skinner being brought back. You know, it's like, again, sort of dipping into the well of Skinner being compromised for the third time now by cigarette smoking man, or maybe even fourth time if you sort of count the situation with Krychek. So, I mean, how do you feel? Like, how do you feel that works? Do you feel that's believable, that it's consistent? I mean, we don't know where the Skinner thing is necessarily going to go now. I mean, we just sort of see him being seduced by by Carl. But do you feel like there's an internal consistency here, or does this just seem contrived to you?
To be honest, it mostly seems contrived, and but I like that they're sort of. I guess what Carter's doing with that whole Skinner CGB thing is he's trying to evoke the kind of, you know, the fun feelings we had to those types of dynamics and relationships in the past, rather than sort of trying to forge new interesting dynamics between the characters. And it's sort of like, you know, it's like calling up the pleasant emotions that we had when we watched characters we enjoy play off in these kind of power plays between each other, and we're like, oh shit, like what the hell is going to happen? Oh no, now he's going to do this and he's going to do that. But because we've seen that all play out a number of times, it's like it feels more nostalgic than anything else to me. Like I don't want to sound too harsh, because like I liked that I get to see Skinner have a bit more screen time in this episode. And what I will say is that Bill Davis, I mean, take your hat off to this guy, because he is absolutely terrifying. Like, I thought he was the best thing about season 10, and to be honest, I thought he was the best thing in this episode, despite the fact that even a lot of Carl's lines were verging on the campy, because he had a lot of like heavy paragraphs of exposition to kind of like spout to Monica and whoever else. But in the scenes where he was just being like a person with a plan, and he wasn't spouting paragraphs of sort of weirdly written dialogue, he was terrifying. Like when he's in this car with Skinner and it's like, oh, it's about vengeance. He's like, oh, it's not just about vengeance. And he gave these sort of like really eerie smiles and sort of looks of genuine thought. Like, you know, there's a thought process going on behind this guy's eyes. So maybe it's just a personal thing, but like I just found his performance terrifying. Like I don't know what it is, but he scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by that, because I'll tell the story, and you know, I don't know how people will take it, but I had met him. I've met Bill a couple times. I met him at a convention in 2008, I believe, and then I met him at a convention. I want to say 2013. Probably 2013, maybe 2013, 2014. So say 4 or 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and boy, I was alarmed because he really seemed out of it. He really seemed. I was worried because it seemed, that he was dealing with senile dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. He just was not engaged. Looking back now, I just realized he was probably just tired. Those conventions can really wear you out. They,
Oh.
just talking to people and everything like that. So, I would say that for a guy his age, he's
Mm.
as much on his game as anyone. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that performance wise, I would, you know, he would be the singled out in this episode. I think his performance was strongest. The thing that I did like about this episode as well is that it seems like Gillian Anderson was a bit more tuned into the Scully character. I really felt in season 10 that she was basically playing her character from The Fall with an American accent rather than a really bad British accent like she does in that series. So it seemed to me that she was a little more engaged with the character. I mean, David, I don't know. I mean, it's...
I think David, like, to me, he felt a bit more like Mulder, and maybe that's because in season 10 I just saw Hank Moody from Californication.
Oh, no question, yeah.
The beard, the kind of the agitprop jacket that he's wearing in the premiere, and like, I was just like, what? This is sort of like, this is just Hank Moody in camouflage and in living in some weird cabin. Like, this is kind of odd, but but the thing is with Duchovny, like, I just feel that even in the later seasons of Cali, for example, there's always a kind of distracted quality with Duchovny where I feel like half the time he doesn't seem to really want to be there or be anywhere. And I felt that in season 10. I felt that in some of the later seasons of Californication. And I think at the very least he's trying here. Like, in this episode, he just felt more energetic. He felt more urgent. He felt a little bit more present. I think I'd need time to reflect on it because it's so brief. I'd have to really sort of watch the episode a few more times, and then my opinions might change.
Yeah,
but,
it seems like he's having fun to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that this is his best work ever, but at least it seems like he's enjoying it.
Yeah.
Just moving this forward a bit, we now have a new Deep Throat and a new Marita, who we meet all at once.
Yeah.
We have this Deep Throat character, and let me just look up real quick because I've been so busy lately that I was like, who is that actor? He looks very familiar, and he sounds very familiar. So just so we don't have a bit of dead air while I'm looking this up, we have these new characters that are very clearly analogs for Deep Throat and Marita. And also, I get a bit of sense of Diana Fowley from the Barbara Hershey character as well. What did you think of this little turn of events here? These, I guess, part of a rival conspiracy that are trying to escape the human race from the planet. So the actor is named A.C. Peterson. I'm not familiar with that name. I'm sure I've seen him in a lot of things, but
you're talking about the other smoking man, right?
Yeah. The smoking Deep Throat, let's just call him.
Yeah. To be honest, I quite liked his inclusion in it, and the reason why is because he seemed to be pitching his performance sort of like somewhere between like black comedy and batshit insanity. But
well put. That's very well put, Raj.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I like that.
but at the same time, he did feel sort of pretty damn menacing. Like, it's like I was thinking, like, I would not want to be in a room with this dude. I don't care who he's trying to save or claiming he's trying to save or what the hell. Like, just no way, dude. Like, I would be anywhere but in a room with these people.
Yeah, so, he was scary. He was definitely genuinely scary, even though he wasn't trying to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think his sort of like humorous take, like, it's like as if the character genuinely found certain things funny that any sane person shouldn't find funny, and that's kind of what made him scary. Like, his kind of breezy interactions that kind of like almost felt that he's sort of like dancing with his words when he's sort of talking to Mulder. Like, it's like, well, maybe you should just kill him. And, like, it was eerie, and I think, yeah, I dug it. I dug the performance.
Yeah, I thought it really worked, and it's interesting because this actor, for some reason, I thought he was German. I don't know why I thought he was German. He's a Vancouver-based actor. His name is Alan Peterson. He's been in pretty much everything that you've ever watched in your life. Um,
I
not,
recognize the guy. Yeah.
yeah, he was in Harsh Realm, but no other 1013 productions prior to this. And then we had the latest Dory Carter stand in the Barbie Barbie Hershey Barbara Hershey character. She didn't seem to make too much of an impression. She wasn't given a lot to do,
Yeah,
except for stand around and look like Dory Carter.
but I think she has that actress has magnificent eyes, and she just has
Piercing,
like,
piercing.
yeah,
Eyes.
like I could just stare at her face all day because she has this sort of eerie beauty and this kind of intelligence and this kind of menace and all these things. But like you said, they didn't actually give her much to do. But like, just from a purely visual standpoint, like she's, to me, she seemed sort of quite formidable, or I could imagine her being quite formidable in episodes to come.
Well, there's another new character here, and maybe not a character that people would necessarily pay attention to because it seems like a stock performance. But we have this doctor who's caring for Scully in the intensive care ward, and she just seems to be like, we've seen this character so many times before in this series, but then she sort of like closes the door and starts talking about
Yeah,
like
I liked that scene. That was cool.
that was really interesting. I did not expect that.
No, because I think what I liked about that character was that I don't know. Like, at first, I thought, okay, is this actress like just incredibly well spoken, or is she not a good actress, or like I'm not sure what's going on. And then it sort of, as it progressed, I was like, oh no, this actress has a kind of like icy coolness, like a kind of, yeah, like an icy cerebral quality to her. So yeah, when she shuts the door and she basically says like, listen, like, the world's crazy, we all know it, like, what the, like, this could be this and this could be that, like,
no, but it's not even what she's saying though. She's saying like, listen, I'm read in, I'm part of the program here.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yes.
Like, you just thought I was just some doctor, but no,
Yeah.
I work for these people too. So
Yeah,
whoever these people are.
She mentions DARPA and she mentions a few other like
Yeah,
agencies.
she's sort of alluding to like remote viewing, and so it's like, yeah, she's part of the program. So that I thought was a really interesting twist, and not a twist that I think a lot of people would necessarily tune into. It might be something that they might sort of overlook, but that to me is the strength of Chris Carter as a writer. Is it's interesting because it's almost like he's a Janus twin unto himself, because he has this tendency for just florid overwriting that just feels clumsy and artless. But then as a storyteller, not necessarily, it's like there's Chris Carter the writer and Chris Carter the storyteller, and they seem to be working at odds, at cross purposes so often.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was trying to get at earlier. Yeah, there's a conflict there.
And a great surprise that I really appreciated was seeing Jeffrey Spender back. And
yeah, for the little that he had, he seemed very in the moment. Like he seemed like he put a lot of energy into the few scenes he had, and I kind of respected that.
Yeah, it's funny for a guy who just sort of looks very average and not particularly exceptional looking. He's got tremendous screen presence, and I always felt that throughout the series, and I think that's why Chris Carter sort of gave him so much to do, as far as carrying the weight of the stories back in the 5th and 6th seasons, because there's just something, he's got a quality. Chris Owens, has a quality, and it's interesting to me, and I really, one of the reasons that I really appreciated seeing him is that Chris Owens really got a raw deal. Now,
He did, definitely.
yeah, because what happened is that he had they had signed him that he was going to appear, throughout season 6, and that he's going to be a central player in this mythology arc, and then for some absolutely unexplained reason, they decided to just end that arc, I don't know, maybe less than halfway through the season. So he just, they just kind of left him dangling. I mean, I'm sure he got paid anyway, but I think that there were, a lot of plans of things to do with his character that never really came to fruition. And I think it's very interesting and revealing in a sense that David had sort of brought him back on, as the show was winding down in the 9th season to appear as Jeffrey. Because I think there was I think on David's part there was certainly a sense of guilt and responsibility, for going down the way it did with this guy. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I hope he appears in more than just that one episode. I would like to see him pop back up, and maybe sort of drive the stories forward.
Yeah, my thoughts on Jeffrey just quickly is like I expected to hate that character, right? Like when he turns up, because I'm all attached to Mulder and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But like I really liked him, and I think the reason I liked him was because the actor, he has some sort of or at least the way he plays Spender is like with a really sort of earnest quality. So that I kind of felt that like if that character hadn't been CGB's son and hadn't got roped into all this craziness, like he would have been an excellent FBI agent. Like, I sort of got the feeling that there was someone righteous and noble sort of in Spender at some point before he gets sort of sucked into this nightmare. So I kind of like that quality about the character.
Well, we sort of see that in his arc, because when he realizes in, I guess is it two fathers and one son? The timeline always sort of gets a little confused for me. But when he realizes in that arc that what his mother and what Mulder and Scully and all these other people have been talking about is actually correct, and that he was in the wrong, that he sort of works to redeem himself, works to right himself. And I think that, it's kind of like a character like Kirsch. Now, a lot of people sort of just felt that Kirsch was, unduly antagonistic. But, James Pickens said something really interesting. He said, when I was preparing for the role of this character, I went to the FBI and I got to know these people, and I saw the way they work. And he said, I saw they got where they were by not by letting just people just run amok doing whatever the hell they wanted. That they had a sense, this chain of command. There was a sense of responsibility to the bureau. I mean, he and that's the way he played that character. And I thought that's why I thought he was a very effective character, because he's not a villain. He's a guy who's saying, quite rightly, you two are out of line. You're not playing the game the way it's meant to be played here. Okay, so let's just get back to the big reveal that seems to be causing a lot of Twitter drama, and that is cigarette smoking man revealing to Skinner that he is the actual, if not the father, or somehow responsible for the birth of Jeffrey. Of William. Now, it's really stunning to me that we're seeing so much consternation over this storyline, because I'm not exactly sure. Like, one thing I do know about a lot of fans online, particularly like the shipper types, is that they sort of tuned into the show relatively late in the series run. Maybe during the 5th season, maybe after the movie, maybe during the 6th season. I mean, I see this a lot. I see this a lot online. It's like, I started watching in the 6th season. Now, okay. I don't think they necessarily are familiar with the fact that, what's cigarette smoking Carl, let's call him the cigarette smoking Carl. What cigarette smoking Carl revealed was just basically a retread of what we saw in Dwayne Barry Ascension One Breath. That Scully was abducted and that she was impregnated, using alien technology, and that, in that case, it was Emily, whose story arc was very short-lived. But, I mean, I don't understand the controversy here, because basically this is just restating what we had already seen on this series. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I would pretty much have to agree. It's it wasn't much of a reveal for me for a number of different reasons, but like that's the kind of shit that the Council Man would pull, right? I mean, he is what interested me about it was just the subtext of it, is the fact that uh, it's kind of like, I mean, Carter doesn't get as heavy-handed as this, but he's, there's a really sort of creepy sort of like rape implication, that is that underlines this and underlines the whole experimentation, taking control of people's bodies, women's bodies, like they can't even own their own reproductive systems. The whole, it just seemed very timely and very sort of, kind of on the pulse of where we are, sort of just coming into 2018. And, so I was like, yeah, but in terms of a plot revelation, it didn't shock me, no, not in the slightest.
Yeah, I mean, because basically, like I said, I mean, we've seen this before. Now, let me ask you this. One thing that we saw with Scully's story in this particular episode is that she's really put through the mill here. She's has a seizure, leaves the hospital, is involved in a car accident, and then somebody tries to kill her in her in her hospital bed. Now, what we're seeing is that, this is misogynistic, this is torture porn, things like that. I mean, things that would never be said if that was happening to Mulder. I mean, if these exact same things are happening to Mulder, and versions thereof have happened in previous episodes, I mean, nobody would blink about this. But it's just a sort of atmosphere, this very superheated atmosphere where this becomes more of a bone of contention. I mean, my feeling is that what she is experiencing here is, very much part of the hero's journey. That opposition rises up against you. That you are you become a victim in many ways, because you're put into battle by necessity, because the hero's journey always involves conflict. Now, I mean, did you get that sense? I mean, it's funny. I didn't really think that, because it's just like, I again, drawing back on so many previous storylines, it seemed like, maybe it was a bit more condensed, but it didn't seem out of character for the X-Files. Did it do?
No, I think to me, it was of a piece with, just Scully's entire character arc, her entire journey, just as you said, the oppositions that she's faced, because she has faced a number of sinister sons of bitches who wanted to objectify her and control her and turn her into something that she didn't want to be and steal from her. And, and they've done the same thing to Mulder many, many, many times in different ways. So it's like, it didn't seem like, let's put the damsel, let's just put the damsel in distress for no reason. I mean, yeah, you could argue that Scully has been a damsel in distress many times throughout the X-Files, etc. And you could also argue that they've tried to subvert that a number of times. But I guess what I'm saying is that as Scully as a whole, her character arc and everything the mythology has been about has kind of, I would suggest, hasn't really tried to shy away from like these themes and these
consequences. The consequences, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, if you're going to save the world, if you're going to try and save the world from like an alien invasion, and there's a secret society of sinister people who are largely men, and you're a woman in that world, that shit is going to be intense, right? I mean, there's like, it's going to be a scary, scary place for a female investigator to be, no matter how brilliant she is, and she is quite brilliant.
Well, let me just ask you to engage yourself in a bit of speculation here, because what we seem to be seeing, and I'm not exactly sure, knowing Chris Carter and his sort of very fractal imagination, whether they are necessarily meant to coincide, but do you see the this sort of hitman who went after Jeffrey in the alleyway? Do you see him working for the same forces. I mean, this new sort of deep throat, cigarette smoking deep throat, let's call him. I mean, do you think that there's this oppositional sense that there are two different uh, factions? Because clearly, and Mulder makes reference to this because it's very hard to sort of distinguish these people and these evil henchmen number one, evil henchmen number two, so on and so forth. But Mulder says, "I know this man because this is the same guy who had followed him and who he had met at cigarette smoking man's chalet there." But when it's never really quite established whether this is somebody working for for Carl, cigarette smoking Carl, or for cigarette smoking Deep Throat. I mean, it might be completely moot, but what is your sense of that?
To be honest, Chris, it's like I didn't really get a sense of that. I wasn't quite sure, and to be honest, like I'm ashamed to say that I don't think that even really occurred to me. I don't think I even really asked myself the question because the show was the premiere was so fast and urgent, and it moved at such a clip, right? It had that sort of modern TV. I don't know, I don't know if you're familiar with the show Blind Spot. So I think it's an NBC show, but it moves so fast. And this episode had that same kind of feeling, like not a moment to really rest or reflect in any real way, apart from like Mulder's monologues. But so I didn't even ask myself that question until you just mentioned it. Like, I have no idea who the hell that dude worked for, or which side he's playing, or what, or he could be some other unforeseen factor. I have no idea. Like, that's my honest answer. I don't know.
Let me ask you a question. What we saw in this struggle and we saw in the previous struggle is these big set pieces. Now, in My Struggle 2, the set piece was this huge fight that Mulder had with Krychek Jr., as I like to call him. He just looked exactly like Krychek, and he dressed like Krychek. So he has this big fight with Krychek's clone, and then we have in My Struggle 3 we have the big set piece of the car chase through very obviously the streets of Vancouver. Did those work for you, or did they feel organic? Did they feel
not really
extraneous?
Not really. For me, it felt extraneous. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love big action and stuff when it's done well, but this just felt I kind of get what they were going for. I get what they were going for. They were kind of going for I get the tone they were going for. I just don't think they pulled it off. And to be honest, I think the car chase just went on a bit too long. Like, I'm not like, I would have cut that car chase in half and used that extra minute or 30 seconds or whatever it was to just like punch up some of the character beats or some of the mood or just maybe like some quieter moments or something. That like, no, I didn't think it was necessary. I think it felt a little bit extraneous, but at the same time, it was Mulder back on the case, and it was some sinister unforeseen variable and what's going to happen now, and all those usual spy thriller kind of beats,
Well, you know what it made me think of? I'll tell you what it made me think of. It made me think of the car chase in Erlenmeyer Flask, and also the car chase in Tempest Fugit. So I'm kind of wondering if there was a sense of like giving a bit of that old school flavor.
I think the car chase in those two episodes was way better than what we got in this premiere. Like in Tempest Fugit, oh my god, that whole sequence is amazing. But in this, for me, it didn't personally grip me. Maybe because it's not like they were just dodging cars and driving fast. And I think maybe the way it was shot, I've just seen car chases shot like that in every episode of TV I've ever watched recently. So I didn't feel like I was seeing anything new. If that scene wasn't in the X-Files, I don't think I would have cared, is I guess what I'm saying.
No, I think that's reasonable. Okay, so what we're looking at here is that we've seen a body of reviews of this season. The first 5 episodes, I think. So what we have coming up next is that we have a Glenn Morgan story. with I would argue Langley returning as an AI, which seems to be what's going on there. And then we have another Chris Carter. Chris Carter doing just a straight up monster story, sort of harking back to his earlier standalones without sort of the bells and whistles, I guess. And then we have Darren Morgan doing a another Darren Morgan episode,
Mhm.
and then
Which is, I think, which I read that it's going to be about the Mandela effect, right? Or one of them, I think, that's a Darren penned episode is going to be. So who knows how that'll go down?
yeah, I really did not enjoy Were Monster. Um,
Yeah.
I'm totally bewildered by the praise it got, and I think that maybe it's sort of a sense of, well, we loved what he did 20 years ago, and maybe a bit of encouragement, but I just thought that I mean, I love Darren Morgan's writing, very much so, and he certainly is the guy who really wrote the book on that whole subgenre within the X-Files, but I just felt that was not very good. Let's just say that.
I think I think it was Were Monster was probably the most indulgent of Darren's scripts. You know what I mean? There was just a kind of indulgent quality where I feel like he kind of probably felt like he was kind of getting away with some bullshit here, which he might have like called himself up on a little bit earlier in his life.
Yeah,
So
well, I think the indulgent is just that he's sort of putting his midlife crisis into the mouth of Mulder,
yeah.
and this other character, the Rice Darby character, in a sense. I mean, it just felt like he was going through some hard times, and maybe depression and midlife crisis and all the rest of it, and he decided to just put that in the mouths of these characters. Again, I mean, I am very much looking forward to this new episode. It seems a bit more straight up, and I'm not exactly sure if he's directing. I think one of the major problems with Were Monster is his direction was just really weak. I think you maybe could have taken that same exact script, and in the hands of a better director, probably would have worked. So, we'll see.
I did like Reese Darby. I
Oh,
thought
he was
that guy
terrific. Yeah, he was terrific.
yeah.
Um,
But I agree with you on everything else for sure.
yeah. So, the basic gist of the review seems to be that okay, well, My Struggle 3 is a bit of a tough slog, but it gets a lot better,
Mhm.
for the next, at least this mini run of 4 episodes. So I guess we'll reconvene with the next episode. Oh, one of the things that I did want to mention is that one of the things that I did really appreciate about My Struggle 3 is that it kind of tied into what James Wong had tried to do with Founder's Mutation, and that character of Kyle Gilligan, I guess his name was, seems very much a prototype for what we're going to see with William this season. So that sort of tying up a lot of these loose strands, because what I really felt that James Wong was trying to do in Founder's Mutation is say, well, remember Toombs, remember the Fluke Man, remember this monster, that monster, this monster. I mean, they didn't just pop up out of the sky. They were created, in this government laboratory using alien DNA, transgenics. So I thought I appreciated that. So, what Carter had done, where so much of what we see with William really harks back to the Kyle Gilligan character in Founder's Mutation. The things are just starting to cohere, because I think one of the very legitimate, one of the very legitimate criticisms you can have of the X-Files is that there's just so many loose strands here, and not, an overt attention to continuity. So,
Yes.
I mean, you sort of had these 2 separate series running parallel with the mythology and the monsters, and I think what I really appreciated that James Wong tried to do was sort of say, well, no, it's all the same thing. It's just different aspects of the same program, and I think that is going to be the operant theme in this episode. I mean, this series that I mean, at least I hope it is, that they're going to make this like, okay, you haven't been watching two separate series all along. You've been watching one series, and this is how we're going to resolve that.
Yeah,
So
that's kind of what I meant earlier about sort of like I hope that Carter is trying to make this season feel like more cohesive in general across mythology, across standalones, etc. You know.
yeah, so I mean, I guess it remains to be seen, but as problematic as I think that this episode was, it seems to me that maybe it's laying down like various markers for the rest of the season. In sort of the way Redux did. Like Redux to me was an endurance test because I couldn't deal with all those completely extraneous and completely unnecessary monologues. If you took those out and just had that beautiful Mark Snow score and Bob Goodwin's direction that was just showing you everything Carter was telling you in these monologues, that it would have been an immeasurably better episode. And now that Mark Snow has released all his soundtracks, I really would love somebody to just go in and just take those voiceovers out and replace them with a soundtrack.
Yeah, I think it would have infinitely improved the episode 100%.
Yeah, and what I did when I did my rewatch of this episode is during the Mulder monologues, I just turned the volume down.
And I bet it helped, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, because they not only is it dialogue that doesn't add to the story, it detracts from it because it's taking your attention off of what should be imparted in the acting. I mean, everything that David seemed to be saying there could have just been gleaned by good direction and good acting. So, I mean, maybe that stuff was added on later. It reminds me of the story of Blade Runner, where Harrison Ford's dialogue was added in later because the studio thought that the story didn't make sense. And ironically, I mean, it's hip to say you love the versions without the dialogue, but I actually like the original version of Blade Runner best. All right, so we're up to the hour now. Let's reconvene next week and see how this series is going. I did note that the ratings are way down, which I actually expected because I think the inflated ratings of the previous season were just because the series had been away for so long, and that lightning is never going to be strike twice in that regard.
But also, I think it's because a lot of crazy stuff went down this year, and I think people are burnt out, and I think strange, weird realities are a lot closer in a lot of people's minds. So the X-Files doesn't seem so far away necessarily. It's a strange year we've had, and I think it's kind of strung people out a little.
Yeah, I think that there's a sense of exhaustion, to be honest with you. I think
absolutely
that, particularly after the holidays and this early January, which is always the worst part of the year. I think like when the holidays are over and it's just like, oh, winter, terrific. Yeah, I think it was probably not the best time to premiere this kind of storyline. I don't think that it's necessarily going to resonate, with the mood. I think it probably would have been better maybe in March or so, but whatever. Okay, so we'll get together next week and we'll try to hash this all out, and hopefully things will start moving in a more positive direction.
Yeah, sounds good, my man. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Chris.
Always. Okay. We'll see you next week on the Secret Sun Radio Mystery Hour Special Edition. And I hope you've enjoyed this, and leave comments and tell us what you thought.